What if the first sin wasn't about a fruit, but about forgetting who we truly are? This question echoes louder than ever in today's world. We chase meaning, wrestle with guilt, crave acceptance, and break rules we once vowed to keep. Not out of evil, but out of something deeper, a hunger for more. The story of Adam and Eve isn't ancient history locked away in old pages. It's a mirror. A mirror that reflects our struggles with temptation, our questions about identity, and the consequences that follow the choices we make when no one is watching. Long before there were kings and prophets, before temples or commandments, there was a garden. Pure, untouched, alive. It wasn't just a place, it was a state of being. Eden was home, not just for Adam and Eve, but for something greater: balance, peace, and the rhythm of divine order. Everything had purpose. Everything belonged. And at the heart of it all, two humans walked with God, not as servants, but as companions. But even in paradise, the seeds of desire were already taking root. The question was never really about whether they'd eat the fruit. The real question was, could they remember who they were? Children made in the image of the Creator, when something seductive whispered, "You could be more." You see, this isn't just the story of the first humans. It's the story of all of us. Every time we stand at the edge of a decision, between what we're told and what we feel, between trust and control, between surrender and self, we're walking through Eden all over again. And yet the beauty of this story isn't just in the fall. It's in what the fall reveals: our desire to become something greater, and the painful lessons that come when we forget the divine spark already placed within us. If you're drawn to untold biblical truth and stories that awaken your spirit, subscribe to the Ethiopian Bible now and hit that bell icon, because what you're about to hear might change how you see your own life. And let me ask you something personal. If you were Eve and had to choose between blind obedience or the chance to be like God, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. In the beginning, there was only silence. Not the kind we know after noise, but the kind that existed before anything ever spoke. There was no sun, no stars, no sky, only the breath of the Almighty hovering over the waters, shaping what would become everything. And then, with a word, it began. Let there be light. And light obeyed. It split the void, dancing like fire across the empty, stretching sky. That light wasn't just brightness. It was order cutting through chaos, clarity in place of confusion. On the first day, light was born, and with it, the rhythm of time. Day and night were named, and even time began to bow to divine intention. On the second day, the heavens stretched open like the dome of a sacred temple. The waters were divided, some above, some below, and what had been formless now began to take shape. The skies weren't just atmosphere. They were a canopy, a veil between the divine and the earthly, a boundary that both concealed and revealed the presence of the Creator. On the third day, the waters gathered, obedient to a voice that carried no threat, only absolute authority. Dry land emerged, and the earth clothed itself in green. Trees lifted their arms, flowers unfolded. Grass blanketed the land like a promise. Every leaf was a declaration that beauty and order would grow together. And then came the fourth day. Lights were hung in the sky, the sun to warm, the moon to soothe, and stars scattered like secrets across the night. They were more than decoration. They were signs, marking sacred seasons and measuring life in holy rhythm. The Ge'ez tradition speaks of these lights not only as functions, but as witnesses, watchers over the covenant between heaven and earth. On the fifth day, the waters came alive. Creatures swam, dove, leapt, some with scales, some with wings. Birds filled the skies with songs no human ear had yet heard. Each wingbeat was a testimony of freedom, each ripple in the sea a hymn of praise. Life didn't just appear, it rejoiced into being. And then, on the sixth day, the earth trembled with even greater wonder. Beasts walked, hooves struck the ground, tails whipped, eyes blinked open to light and land. Lions roared, deer ran, and then something different happened. The Creator bent low, not to speak, but to shape. Dust was gathered, not discarded. Earth was held, not cast away. And from that earth man was formed, not commanded into being, but sculpted, formed with intention, touched by divine breath. "Let us make man in our image," the voice declared, and so it was. Humanity was not just formed from the dust, it was marked by the breath of God. Male and female, they were made not just to survive, but to walk with purpose, to bear resemblance to their Maker. In the Ge'ez texts, there's a reverence in how this moment is described, not as domination, but as a sacred appointment, a partnership with the divine to care for creation, and then paradise. A garden was planted, not in chaos, but in the east, in a place called Eden. Rivers flowed through it, trees stood tall, heavy with fruit, both nourishing and mysterious. In the center of this garden stood two trees. One promised life, the other, knowledge. And there, in this sacred ground, man and woman lived, not as slaves, not as wanderers, but as caretakers. Eden was not just a location. It was a symbol of potential, of purity, of intimacy with the divine. There was no shame, no hiding, no masks. The air itself seemed to glow with the nearness of God. Work was not a burden, but a joy. Companionship was not an afterthought, but a gift. In this space, the world was still as it should be, untouched by fear, free from guilt, resting in the peace of perfect connection. And when the seventh day came, creation ceased, not out of exhaustion, but completion. The Creator rested, not because he was tired, but because everything was now in its place. The rhythm of the universe had begun, from void to beauty, from silence to song, from dust to divine image. This was the world before the fall. Not just good, but deeply, unmistakably whole. The man opened his eyes for the very first time, not in fear, but in wonder. His chest rose with breath that was not his own, but given. Life was not stumbled into, it was bestowed. The breath of God had filled his lungs, and in that moment, Adam was more than just dust. He was awake, aware, and alive. The ground beneath him felt firm, and the sky above endless. But around him, everything pulsed with life. Rivers whispered nearby, birds sang in colors he didn't yet know names for, and animals moved in patterns, too complex to comprehend. Yet for all the beauty Eden held, something was missing. Adam felt it in the quiet moments, not as a thought, but as a shadow. He could name every beast, every bird, giving language to creatures no one else would ever identify. The lion, majestic and bold. The dove, soft and gentle. The serpent, smooth and silent. Yet none of them looked back at him with recognition. None of them knew his silence. None carried the ache of his questions. He walked the garden, tending it, touching its fruit, hearing its songs. Still in the fullness of life, he was alone. He could feel it in his bones, not just solitude, but the absence of something he could not yet name. And then, like a whisper, the voice came again. "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Genesis 2:18. Adam lay down, not out of fatigue, but obedience. Sleep was holy here, a doorway for something sacred. And while he slept, something deep was taken, not merely a rib, but the part of him that longed to be seen, known, mirrored. From that place, she was formed, not a copy, not a servant, but a companion, crafted with care, beauty, and strength. She wasn't made from the earth like Adam. She was made from him, of his breath, of his life. And when he opened his eyes, again, there she was. And for the first time, his world was complete. Adam didn't ask who she was. He knew. "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." Genesis 2:23. It wasn't about naming her. It was about recognizing her. She wasn't beside him. She was with him. His echo, his counterpart, his equal. They walked together, not in dominance, not in silence, but in song. They laughed without shame, touched without fear, explored without hesitation. Their bodies were uncovered, and yet no guilt crept into their thoughts. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Genesis 2:25. There was no need to hide, no voice of accusation, no fear of being unworthy. Love wasn't earned, it simply was. And yet, within that perfection, curiosity stirred. Not rebellion, just wonder. Adam, walking beside Eve, may have asked questions out loud, not because he doubted, but because he wanted to understand. What was the purpose behind naming all these animals? Why did the giraffe's neck stretch so long? Why did the lion roar? Were there meanings behind every color of the sky? Was there a reason the sun set in fire each evening? Perhaps Eve, gazing at the center of the garden, felt questions of her own. The tree of life, so radiant, so rooted. And then the other, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Why was that one forbidden? Not guarded, not out of reach, just off limits. She may have wondered what harm could possibly exist in a place so pure. Could knowledge itself be dangerous? Or was it something else, something unseen, that made the boundary sacred? Together they touched everything but that. Together they danced in the freedom of obedience, not as restriction, but as trust. They didn't question the voice that gave them life. Not yet. Instead, they celebrated the freedom of being fully known and fully loved, without masks, without secrets. In those early days, their unity wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, deep. They didn't complete each other because they were incomplete. They complemented each other because they were designed for communion. Adam's strength didn't overpower Eve's grace. It matched it. Eve's wisdom didn't silence Adam's wonder. It enhanced it. And in that harmony, the world was still singing. They didn't know what was coming. Not the weight of guilt, not the voice of deception, not the sting of separation. All they knew was each other. And in each other, they saw a glimpse of the one who had made them. Each glance was worship, each breath a reminder. They were made for this, not just to live, but to live in love. They were human, yes, but they were whole. He was beautiful, in a way that didn't threaten. His voice didn't slither like his body. It sounded calm, intelligent, inviting. The serpent didn't lurch from behind a tree or hiss in the shadows. He didn't need to. His power wasn't in his presence, it was in his questions. Eve had walked near the tree of the knowledge of good and evil before, many times in fact, but this time she stayed longer. Not because she planned to rebel, but because she was thinking, observing, wondering. The fruit was unlike the others, not glowing or strange, just untouched. And in a world where everything had been given so freely, why was this one thing withheld? Then he spoke, not with command, not with threat, but with something far more dangerous: suggestion. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? Eve turned, startled not by the voice, but by the question. She responded almost instinctively. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," she said. "But God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" The serpent tilted his head. Calm. Controlled. "You will not surely die," he said softly. There was no fire in his words, just persuasion. "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." That was it. No force, no lies screamed into the wind, just a seed, a thought planted deep into the soul. Be like God, not to dethrone him, not to destroy, but to know, to see, to understand. Eve wasn't greedy. She wasn't foolish. She was human. And curiosity wasn't a sin. Not yet. Her eyes lingered on the fruit. It looked good. Her thoughts raced. Was obedience about fear or trust? Did God withhold something out of love or control? She reached. Not trembling, just unsure. The air seemed to still. Even the birds paused in their songs. Fingers brushed the skin of the fruit, smooth, ordinary, timeless. She took it. The bite wasn't dramatic. The sky didn't crack. No thunder rolled. The crunch was soft, almost unnoticeable. But in that moment, everything shifted. The world didn't collapse, but something inside her did. She handed the fruit to Adam. He had watched. Not from afar. He was there. He saw her listen, saw her wonder, saw her take. And she looked at him, not with malice, but with an ache, like she had seen something he had not, and wanted him to understand it too. Adam's thoughts were a storm. He remembered the voice. He remembered the command. But more than that, he saw her, his partner, his own flesh. She wasn't falling apart. She wasn't dying. She was waiting. For him. To choose. Not just between God and the fruit, but between distance and closeness. Between standing still or stepping into her story, he took the fruit. The bite came with no sound, but suddenly, the silence was louder than ever. The garden felt strange, familiar but distant, cold. Their eyes opened, not in revelation, but in exposure. Shame rushed in like a wave. Their bodies that once felt holy now felt bare, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Nakedness wasn't just skin anymore. It was truth. And now they wanted to hide. They looked at each other but couldn't look for long. Something had been lost. The ease, the comfort, the innocence. Adam clutched fig leaves with trembling hands. Eve's breath grew shallow. She couldn't explain it, but she knew. Something inside her had changed. "What have we done?" she whispered. The wind moved through the trees, but it felt colder now. "Why does the wind feel cold?" she asked, though no answer came. Adam felt panic. Guilt was a foreign feeling, but now it wrapped around his chest like a weight. He wasn't just afraid of being seen. He was afraid of being known, truly known. The voice that had once walked with them in the cool of the day now felt like thunder approaching. They heard God walking, his presence, once their joy, now filled them with dread. They ran, hiding behind trees that once gave them shade. In peace, now used as shields. "Where are you?" the voice called. Not angry, not screaming, just seeking. But it still pierced their hearts. Adam's voice broke as he answered. "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God's next question wasn't for information, it was for confrontation. "Who told you that you were naked?" There it was, the turning point, the beginning of the end. Adam, now crushed under the weight of shame, did what humanity has done ever since. He pointed. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit and I ate it." Eve's eyes widened, not in betrayal, but in sorrow. She turned, heart thudding in her chest. "The serpent deceived me," she said, "and I ate." The ground beneath them didn't split, but their world had. The garden, their home, now felt foreign. The leaves couldn't cover the ache. The distance between them and God wasn't marked in miles, but in silence. They once danced under the trees, now they crouched behind them. They once ran to his voice, now they ran from it. And in their brokenness, humanity began. The voice moved through the garden like thunder beneath a whisper. "Where are you?" It wasn't that God didn't know where they were physically. It was that something deeper had been lost, a connection, a closeness, a shared rhythm between creator and creation. The question was an ache. It echoed across the trees, across time, across hearts even today. Adam emerged from the shadows, his body clothed in fig leaves. But nothing could cover his shame. He had once walked in this garden with his head high, his spirit unburdened. Now he avoided God's gaze. His voice, once used to name all living creatures, now trembled as he blamed. First the woman, then God himself. "The woman you put here, with me, she gave me the fruit, and I ate it." It was a sentence soaked in fear, but also in separation. Not just from God, but from Eve. Eve spoke too, not with rebellion, but with regret. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Her voice cracked as the words left her lips, not because she was defending herself, but because she was facing the weight of what had been done. She didn't try to undo it. She couldn't. God turned to the serpent first, the creature that had slipped into the garden with a tongue sharp enough to divide innocence from obedience. There was no question for the serpent, no space for dialogue. God didn't ask why. He declared what would be. "Because you have done this, cursed, are you above all livestock and all wild animals? You will crawl on your belly and eat dust all the days of your life." The curse wasn't just about the body, it was about position. Once the serpent had spoken with cunning from above, now he would slither in silence below. And then came the promise, not for the serpent, but for history. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." A whisper of hope, a foreshadow of redemption. Even in wrath, God sowed a seed of rescue. To Eve he spoke next, not with cruelty but clarity. "I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children." But it wasn't just physical pain. It was emotional entanglement too. "Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." Her heart would now be tethered to longing. Love would no longer be pure freedom. It would be woven with need, imbalance, misunderstanding. The partnership that once danced in unity now walked with friction. Then to Adam, the first formed, the one who had heard the command directly. "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree." The judgment wasn't just about the act. It was about the choice, the breaking of trust. "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life." The earth, once generous, would now resist. Work would be wearying. Sweat would stain his brow. "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken." Then came the words that burned. "For dust you are, and to dust you will return." Not punishment, reality. They had been made to live forever. Now, death had entered the story. In that moment, Eden was no longer just a place. It was a memory, a home their hands could no longer touch, a song they could no longer hum. But even as judgment fell, something tender happened. God, in His justice, did not abandon them naked. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. He covered them, not with leaves, but with something that cost life. A foreshadow of sacrifice, blood for covering, grace in the midst of justice. But Eden could not remain their dwelling. Holiness and brokenness could not share the same soil. And so, the exile began. The moment they stepped out of the garden, the wind felt different. The ground, now dry and cracked, welcomed them with silence. The colors faded, the warmth dimmed. Behind them, the entrance to Eden sealed shut, not with a wall, but with a sword. After He drove the man out, He placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Not to punish them further, but to protect them, to keep them from eating the fruit of eternal life in their fallen state, to prevent an eternity of brokenness. Still, it felt like a door had closed forever. They didn't just lose a place. They lost a version of themselves, the Adam who laughed freely under the sun, the Eve who danced barefoot through rivers without fear. That man and woman no longer existed. In their place stood two people who now knew shame, sweat, longing, and distance. They looked at each other differently now, not with less love, but with the heavy knowledge of what they'd lost. They would still love, still raise children, still build a life. But Eden would always remain in the corners of their memory, like a dream they couldn't fully wake from. Every cry of childbirth, every thorn in the field, every silence between husband and wife would echo Eden's absence. But somewhere beneath, the grief, buried under the dust, remained the faint hope of what God had promised, that one day the serpent's head would be crushed and the exile would not be forever. But for now they walked east, hand in hand, broken, covered, alive. Eden isn't just an ancient garden tucked somewhere beyond the rivers of Mesopotamia. It lives within the collective memory of humanity, a symbol of innocence, of harmony, of what it means to live in unbroken connection with God, nature, and oneself. It represents the part of the human spirit that longs to be known without fear, to love without pain, to walk without hiding. And yet, like Adam and Eve, we all find ourselves on the outside, trying to return to a place we can barely describe, but deeply feel we've lost. The serpent in the garden, subtle, eloquent, patient, may no longer speak from the branches of trees. Today, its voice comes from within. It questions not just what we do, but who we are. Did God really say has turned into, are you really enough? Or, what if everything you believe is a lie? The serpent is not always evil in appearance. Sometimes it sounds reasonable, even compassionate. That's what makes temptation powerful. It doesn't always feel wrong. It often comes disguised as curiosity, self-improvement, or even love. This story is not just about one forbidden fruit. It's about the daily choices we make, to trust or doubt, to obey or wander, to reach for something that promises more but leaves us with less. Eden becomes a mirror. We see in it our own hearts, the longing for perfection, the failure to hold it, the grief that follows when we trade truth for desire. Shame enters quietly but cuts deeply. Adam and Eve covered themselves not because someone told them to, but because something inside them broke. That same shame still walks beside us. It's what makes us hide parts of ourselves from others, from God, and even from our own reflection. It's the voice that says, you're no longer worthy, even after we've been forgiven. And perhaps the most painful truth is this: once we've tasted the fruit, We can never be who we were before. The knowledge of good and evil cannot be unlearned. Yet there's something profoundly human in their story. Adam's silence, Eve's curiosity, the moment of surrender, the breath caught in their chests as their eyes opened to a world both bigger and colder than they imagined. They didn't fall because they were monsters. They fell because they were human. And in that fall, we find not only sorrow, but kinship. Modern life might not look like Eden, but the struggle remains the same. We chase things we think will make us whole: relationships, careers, status, control. We build walls to protect ourselves from pain, only to feel more alone. We redefine truth to suit our wants, only to feel more lost. The serpent may have changed its shape, but its strategy has not. And yet the story doesn't end with exile. In the Ethiopian tradition, especially within books like Enoch and Jubilees, the story is layered with spiritual depth that extends beyond the garden. There is a cosmic battle unfolding, one that involves angels, watchers, and destinies far greater than just two people and a tree. According to the book of Jubilees, Adam and Eve fasted in mourning after their exile, seeking reconciliation with God. This detail isn't found in the standard Genesis account, but it highlights a truth. Even after the fall, the human heart still reaches for redemption. The Ethiopian Bible also speaks of a world where knowledge is not inherently evil, but must be stewarded with reverence. The tree of knowledge was not poisonous, it was powerful. The sin was not in seeking wisdom, but in seeking it apart from God. That's still true today. Knowledge without wisdom can destroy. Power without purpose corrupts. Freedom without boundaries leads to ruin. In psychological terms, Adam and Eve's story maps onto every human being's journey. The innocence of childhood, the testing of boundaries, the first heartbreak of realizing our actions have consequences, the loss of trust, the longing for home, not a physical one, but a spiritual state of wholeness. Shame, identity, regret, these aren't ancient ideas. They are the everyday weather of the soul. And perhaps that's why this story still matters. It's not just a tale of the first humans. It's a blueprint of the human condition. The choice between listening to the voice of God or the whispers of doubt. The moment we recognize that we've done something that cannot be undone. The hope that even after everything we are not beyond mercy. Even now, Eden calls. Not as a place we can walk to, but as a state we can glimpse. In moments of grace, in acts of love, in the quiet spaces where our hearts remember who we were before the world told us otherwise. The path back is not about reversing time. It's about returning trust. It's about remembering that we were not created to live in shame, but to walk in light. In this way, the story is not old, it is eternal. And every time we choose love over pride, obedience over rebellion, humility over ego, we take one step closer to the garden we lost, and to the God who still walks among the trees, whispering not in anger, but with a question that waits patiently for our answer. Where are you? We began in the quiet beauty of a garden, where everything was whole, and ended at the edge of exile, with hearts heavy and eyes wide open. But even as Adam and Eve stepped out of Eden, the story wasn't over. Humanity fell, yes, but that fall didn't sever the divine thread that runs through our story. It simply shifted the journey. We are not defined by the moment we fell, but by the steps we take after. Steps toward forgiveness, healing, and the rediscovery of our purpose. This ancient tale reminds us of something deeply personal, that, no matter how far we stray, the echo of Eden still lives inside us. It's in the hunger for peace, the ache for belonging, and the silent questions we ask in the dark. That longing is not weakness, it's a compass. And even now, east of Eden, God's voice still calls. Not in condemnation, but in invitation. The same God who once walked among the trees now walks beside us, through our struggles, regrets, and hopes. We haven't been abandoned. We've been awaited. The spiritual legacy of Adam and Eve isn't just their mistake, it's their resilience. They learned to live with pain, to work the ground, to raise children, and to hold on to a God they could no longer see but still trusted. That is the path we walk now. A world no longer perfect, but still sacred. Lives marked by scars, but still guided by grace. So if this story stirred something in you, don't let it pass like a passing thought. Let it settle. Let it speak. And if you're hungry for deeper truth, stories that reach beneath the surface, and a voice that dares to ask what others won't, then subscribe to the Ethiopian Bible and hit that bell icon. We're not just telling stories here, we're remembering who we are. And before you go, ask yourself this: do you think humanity is still trying to get back to Eden? And what does Eden mean to you today? Share your heart in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, the way back starts when we stop hiding and start remembering.